Well, Hayes Carll, welcome to Biscuits and Jam.
Great to be here.
Where am I reaching you?
I'm at my home in Nashville, Tennessee.
Okay. And you've been in Nashville for a good while now, right?
Yeah, probably 6 years or so.
Well, not too long before the pandemic, I guess.
Yeah, we kind of got here. Let's see, we got married in 2019, my wife and I. We were living in New York at the time, and we made the move full-time here right around the fall of 19. So got here just under the radar, and we're able to ride out the storm of 2020 and beyond from the comfort of Nashville, which I'm very grateful for.
Well, I'm sure that's a great town for you to be in, and probably just being surrounded by all the creative talent there, all the musical talent, all the venues, everything, just the whole atmosphere. It's got to be a fun place to be for y'all.
It is. I've been coming up here since 2002 professionally, and made a lot of friends and acquaintances in the business. And so I had a built-in community, and my wife lived here a decade or more early on in her life. And so it was when we were looking for a place to start our lives together, Nashville was the most logical choice, and it's been fantastic. It is a really incredible creative community, and there's a lot to be said for looking at all the young kids coming up that are really hungry and that are working, and it inspires me and it pushes me, and then I can the same day go have a conversation with a legend who can be a mentor, or I can pick their brain on things I'm going through. So it's really a remarkable town.
That's great. That's great. Well, I want to talk about your hometown for a minute, and where you grew up, which was in Texas, in the Woodlands, if I'm not mistaken, kind of a Houston suburb. Tell me a little bit about that community and what it was like growing up there.
Yeah, I was born in Houston, and my mom grew up in Houston, and my dad was from Waco. And we moved to the Woodlands in 1977. There were 1,200 people there at the time. It was a pine forest that a guy named George Mitchell had purchased and was going to develop to make this planned community. And so it's now it's like the number one planned community in America, and it's there's over 100,000 people there, and it's huge. I'm actually playing the 50th anniversary of the town in a few months with Lyle Lovett.
Oh, wow. That'll be something.
It's going to be a full circle moment, and I can tell you more about that later. But when I was growing up, it was just some houses in the woods kind of. So, I was very fortunate that I grew up on a street with 3 kids that were my age, and my parents both worked. And so we just kind of, ran around all summer long, barefoot in the streets, playing lots of sports, collecting. We had a creek that ran behind our house that we could go out and collect crawdads or tadpoles or frogs or turtles or anything we could collect, and we could just go explore through the woods and take our slingshots and our BB guns and just go be wild and feral, and then we just stay out until dark, and then our parents would call us home, or we'd eat dinner at our friends' houses, and it was a pretty really free environment to grow up and just be a kid.
Very different from the Woodlands of today.
I don't know. I assume there's still some of that, but I think anywhere today. Like I think a lot about how things were growing up, whereas people would call you and you would answer the phone, and people would knock on your door and you would answer the door, and now if somebody knocks on my door, like alarm bells go off, and it's just we have a different way of interacting with each other, but we really did know our neighbors, and we leaned on each other in certain ways, and it really was a neighborhood and a town that very much I think people felt like they were building something together from scratch, because they were. And the guy who created it, one of his sons lived on our street, and he designed the houses there. And I grew up playing with his daughters, and it was just, 4th of July parades, and, ride your bike in the parade. And we had just little festivals and gatherings and the little league sports and all that stuff. And so I'm sure a lot of that is still there. But there's probably an innocence or a feeling of safety that everybody kind of seemed to have that I'm not sure is prevalent anywhere in America these days.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about your mom and dad, what they did for a living.
So my dad was an attorney. He started practicing the year I was born, and he just set up he put out his shingle, rented a space, and started from scratch. My dad was in the Navy and for a while, and during that time, my mom worked as a teacher, and then some beyond. And she was in the YWCA, worked there with a lot of women in the Houston area. And then she eventually went to law school when I was a kid and became a lawyer as well. So my dad was a real estate attorney, and my mom was a divorce and custody attorney. And she gave it up in probably in my late teens, early 20s. There's no happy stories and divorce and custody proceedings, and
did it kind of wear on her?
Oh yeah. I don't think she enjoyed it at all. I think my dad liked his job. He enjoyed his work. My mom was a theater major in college, and hyper verbal and super creative, and I think she probably would have preferred to be an actress or something in a more creative field. Choose the paths you choose to take care of your family and try to have stability in life. And so she did that for a long time, but eventually called it a day.
Do you attribute any of your musical interest or talent to your folks?
I do, yeah. I mean, not my dad. My dad's not musical at all. God bless him. But my mom's doesn't have particularly a ton of talent. She's a nice singer, but she has a passion for it, for creativity, for art, for language, for emotional connection. And that very much rubbed off on me. I had an uncle who I only met twice in my life. He spent most of my life in prison, but he was a singer, and apparently grew up in Houston playing in garage bands with Kenny Rogers and Mickey Newberry, and so I had this sort of connection through him to music. And then his father, my mom's father, Ivan Pressler, did a lot of different things. Worked for the railroads, was a cowhand, and he apparently knew all these old cowboy songs and had a nice voice and could sing all these old country, specifically cowboy songs. And my mom would always tell me about it. But my grandfather had a stroke the year that I was born, and he lost his ability to speak. And so I never got to hear him. I spent a lot of time with him, but he couldn't really talk, and he sort of made up these words. Tarmade was the word that he used for basically everything. But he was a boxer, and so he would always relive to me his brawls or the events that he could by pantomiming or just making noises. And but we had I'm sorry, I'm digressing here, but I had a really powerful experience one year at Christmas time, and we were all standing around the Christmas tree, and we decided to sing Silent Night as we put the angel on top of the tree. And so we're singing, and it's my brother and my parents and some cousins and my grandparents, and we kind of collectively hear this voice that we can't place. And we turn around, and my grandfather's singing Silent Night beautifully. was the only time I ever heard him sing. And in this, I was 27 at the time or something like that. And so it was just like, you've been holding out. I don't know if, sometimes like people can, there's a different, for verbal communicating versus singing or melodic. And I don't know if he had that ability and didn't know it himself, or just didn't want to use it, or if it was just a one-time thing, but it was really powerful. But anyway, he was apparently a great singer. And so I have those members of my family who dabbled in music. But mostly I attribute it to my mom's passion and creativity.
What a surprise that must have been for everyone when he just lit up and started singing. And especially for you, if you hadn't really heard him speak or let alone sing for your pretty much your entire life.
Yeah, it was very powerful and emotional for everybody.
Was there a recording of him singing? Was that ever recorded? No.
Well, my mom a couple years ago, she gave me a bunch of vinyl that she had thought were my Uncle Ted and my grandfather singing. And so I got them sent off to get them transferred to digital, and but they were so degraded that that there really wasn't anything listenable there. So they did each make a little recording at times, but it's not something you can really hear.
You'll just have to use your imagination, I guess, to try and imagine what he must have sounded like. Well, so Hayes, I want to ask you about food. It sounds like you had a pretty big family. You had some big gatherings around the holidays. Who was doing all that cooking?
My mom's side of the family, it would just be my grandparents that would come over, and they weren't. My grandfather couldn't speak and didn't cook, and my grandmother was more of the TV dinner variety of chef. So my mom and dad would prepare the meals when it was that side of the family. But on my dad's side of the family, it was a whole different story. He had a large, extensive family in Waco, Texas, where he was from. And we would get together, and it would be my grandparents, my great-grandmother who lived with them, Mama, she lived to be 101. And Aunt Fanagine was Mama's sister, and she lived in the house next door.
Fanagine.
Aunt Fanagine. And that we have a joke in our family, because Aunt Fanagine was apparently a decent cook, but she would always skimp on like how much she prepared. And so whenever people would come over for dinner, she would prepare dinner, and everyone would eat every single bit because they're starving. And so when the meal was over, she would look at everybody's plates, which were clean, and she would say, "It looks like we had just enough." And so that's a joke in our family, is whenever there's not enough food or something, or it's empty. It's like, it looks like we had just enough. But my Nana and Papa had a big garden, pecan tree. And so, we would shuck beans and peas, and they grew tomatoes and okra and all kinds of stuff. And then my grandpa was a big fisherman, so we would go catch a bunch of bass on Lake Waco and fry them up. And they would make chicken and dumplings for me. It was not a healthy diet, but it was so good. And biscuits and gravy, that was my treat when I would come, and I would always try and set a record for how many biscuits I could eat. And so, it got absurd, but they would just ply me with food, and they got a thrill out of it. I was their first grandchild, and I loved to eat, so they loved to cook for me. And but yeah, those family gatherings, you'd have aunts and uncles and cousins, and just on. And so with like 50, 60 people, multi-generational folks, and everybody would bring a casserole or a pie or a this or that, and so that was a whole different experience.
And this is all Texas people, right? I mean,
yeah.
So you've got some pretty deep Texas roots.
Yeah, I'm a 7th generation Texan, and my son is an 8th generation Texan, and yeah, we go back a ways. Recently, we had this great I don't even know how many greats, but a relative who was a surgeon in the Civil War, and he had this collection of letters that he wrote his wife back home in Texas, and they're just amazing. The Baylor University put them on display for a while, and the first line of one of the letters is, I'm writing to you on Yankee paper with a Yankee pen, so you know which way the battle went. He was with the Confederacy, and I just thought, what an evocative opening line for anything. This was just a letter to his wife, but like, boy, that tells a whole lot. So yeah, the roots run deep in Texas.
Well, it sounds like there's, some song material there that which you may have mined already, but
I want to, there's so many interesting characters in the family. And I told my mom the other day, I said, I want to sit down with you and talk about them, because I do want to write about them, or at least have the knowledge for myself, because we've got a lot of interesting stories. There's some relative who died in a gunfight over a pig. I'm just like, there's some fascinating stories there, including in really close family. And I'd like to put it down one day in some form or another.
So, Hayes, you got a lot of attention early in your career for a song called "She Left Me for Jesus."
Mm-hmm.
Was church going part of your growing up? Were you a big church going family or no?
When I was in Waco with my grandparents, we would go, and my best friend was the son of a Methodist minister. So when I spent the night at his house, I would go. And in playing sports in the towns I grew up in, if you went to Bible study, you got more playing time, or it was around, and it was very present, and a lot of people were kind of pushing me that way. But my parents weren't doing that, and I think they were interested in a spiritual life, but not in necessarily a religious one. And so we went occasionally to the Unitarian Church. People wearing flip flops and had ponytails, and it's like a different scene than any church I had been to that point. And I quite liked it. It just felt very accepting to me, and that's where I kind of caught the music bug in a way, was through there, because
through the Unitarian Church.
Yeah. So the Unitarians were not, at least the ones in the Woodlands, were not known for their choirs. And rather than have all this, these disparate folks singing songs that they probably didn't know or grow up with, they would often bring in performers to entertain. And one day it might be somebody reading from Dante's Inferno, and the next it was something acting out the creation story, or Jesus in Nazareth. And but one day I went in, and there was a folk trio, and they played 3 Bob Dylan songs. I was 14, and I was already a huge music fan. I grew up on country music and a little bit of rock, but just a really heavy dose of country. And when I heard these songs, they played "Blowing in the Wind" and "A Hard Rain's Gonna Fall," and I can't remember what the third one was. But it hit me with such force, seeing these people deliver these songs, and the songs themselves hit me with such force, that I asked my parents that day. I said, I would really like a guitar. And that Christmas, I got a guitar before I turned 15, and so it was a very direct line, and it also opened me up to Bob Dylan, and that set me down a rabbit hole that I've never quite come up from.
I mean, "A Hard Rain's Gonna Fall" in church. I mean, that's a big song for a church. I mean, there's like 15 verses, I think, to that song.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of influences, I think about someone growing up in Texas and who's interested in songwriting and music, and there's so much around you. I mean, there's so many people. Even just looking at the men alone, Towns Van Zandt, Robert Earl Keen, Willie, Chris Christopherson, all these people,
Yeah.
um, who were some of the ones in terms of Texas songwriters, musicians that really, that you really latched onto?
Yeah, early on, it was definitely Willie. Like my first musical memories are hearing Willie on the radio in the car. Um, Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain. It's one of my first memories. Mama's Don't Let Your Babies Grow Up to Be Cowboys was one of the first things I remember singing along to. Who was I thinking of? Oh, Kenny Rogers was a big one for me. Kenny's a Houston guy, and I had a cassette tape, like a greatest hits tape, and a little recorder tape deck that I would walk around the house with. And I was an only child till I was 9, and we didn't have a TV for a good part of that. And so that tape was sort of my escape into another world. And it's kind of how I entertained myself. And I just remember sitting under the stairwell for hours listening to Lucille and The Gambler and Coward of the County. And these songs were sagas and, hit every range of a human emotion. And they were really powerful to me, and they had a great hook and were fun to sing along to. So that was really a big thing for me growing up. So those were probably the Willie and Kenny Rogers were the earliest ones. And then as I got older and I started to get into the songwriters and the Jerry Jeff Walkers and Chris Christopherson and Towns. Actually, Towns came much later. It took me a while to really be able to appreciate what Towns did. But early on, I liked the good time in music, the honky tonk stuff. And I really liked the romance around those guys and the lore and the legend and all that stuff. So, growing up in a planned community, which in retrospect was great in a lot of ways, but it didn't encourage you to let your freak flag fly or go against the grain necessarily. And I was kind of like a lot of people rebelling against that in my own way, and really wanted to find a freedom and a sense of purpose that a lot of those guys embodied to me. And so I got really invested in the romanticism of the singer songwriter, of the traveling bard musician, of the drinker, and the guy who's just out there having life experiences and then channeling it into poetry of some kind.
Yeah, I mean, these guys all had these incredible experiences and stories and that reach sort of mythic proportions, particularly the way they channel them into song. So that's got to be
Yeah.
pretty appealing to a teenager, especially who's into music. It was appealing to me. So, but Willie in particular, I'm wondering if you've met him or had the chance to get to know him a little bit.
Yeah, I have not. I've never met Willie. I recorded my first record at his studio, the Pedernales. I was on the same record label, Lost Highway Records, for a number of years. I know one of his ex-wives, 3 of his children, several of his band members. I've played his picnic multiple times, and I have countless friends who are in his world every day. My sister-in-law made a record with him. I mean, like everyone around me has had interaction with Willie, and I've never met him. It's just never worked out.
The stars just haven't aligned. Yeah. Well, I hope you get the chance. I'm sure that would mean a great deal.
It'd be nice to meet him. I've been fortunate to meet several of my heroes, and he is absolutely at the top of the list. So it would be nice, but I'm just so, whether I meet him or not, I'm incredibly grateful that he exists on this planet and that he has lived his life the way he has. It's been a really wonderful example, I think, of how to be.
No doubt about that. Hayes, I want to touch on Arkansas for a minute. You spent some formative years there. You went to Hendrix College, and you had an album called Little Rock, and a great song called Little Rock. And it's not a place that is that is producing, tons of musicians every day. Certainly not the way that Nashville is. It doesn't maybe get the credit it deserves
Mhm.
sometimes. But I'm wondering, what those years in Arkansas meant to you.
When I was 18, I went off to school in Conway, Arkansas, just north of Little Rock. I was coming from Texas, where we just are raised to think we're special, and have egos and loud mouths, and I don't know how we got that way, but just clearly are. And so I came in hot, to Arkansas, and was rocking my "Don't Mess with Texas" shirt and my boots, and thought I was special. And I had some older fellas, some of whom were from Texas, pretty quickly let me know that didn't really fly. And I quickly, put that aside and tried to embrace where I was and that experience. And, I lived in a dry county, so it was like the town I was in was not a great representation of, the highlights of Arkansas. But I met a lot of folks from all over the state while I was in school. I ultimately married an Arkansan. My first wife lived in Conway, the town I was at school at, and she went to school with me. And I had an uncle who was a minister in Little Rock. I forgot to tell you about him.
Oh, so you had a family connection there.
I did.
Yeah.
My Uncle Tom was a Methodist minister in Little Rock. I mean, he was in his late 60s, mid 70s when I was there, but I did have family there, and I really loved exploring the state, just going to the Ozarks and seeing the vibes in small towns, and it just coming from where I came from, it gave me a different perspective on people. My window was pretty limited to this town in Texas, and so it expanded my world view a bit, and I just came to really appreciate the state and a lot of the people in it and what they were about. So yeah, and when I started playing music, I had a little bit of a built-in crowd there just from having gone to school there, and I used to joke, like I'd say a lot of people back home in Texas have been making a lot of money writing songs about Texas, which was true. But I got in the game too late to take advantage of it. So what I'm doing is writing songs about Arkansas, and just waiting for it to be the next big thing in country music. And I'm still waiting, but I have a lot of songs about Arkansas and just a lot of great memories there. And it was very formative in my life.
Well, as a Memphis guy who grew up going to Arkansas quite a bit, I'm a big fan of that state and the people there. It's a wonderful place. So
Yeah.
I love that you spent some time there and paid it some tribute. I wanted to ask about your wife, Allison Moorer, who you mentioned earlier that y'all had moved to Nashville together, and she's also been a collaborator of yours. You've written some music together, and I'm just curious, how y'all met.
We met here in Nashville in 2003 or four. We're not sure which. There was a bar here in town that she used to hang out at with friends, and I came to town, and she was already an established artist and incredibly talented, and I was just this newbie kid who I'm 4 years younger than she is, and about 20 years less mature, and so I just kind of had a crush on her instantly, and but it was not to be at that time. It was way out of my league, and but we became friends, and then she, the producer I was working with on my second record, was a guy named R.S. Field, and he had done records with Allison, and they were close. And he asked her to come and sing on my record, and she did. And so she sang on 2 songs, and next year is the 20th anniversary of that record, the Little Rock record, and it's really cool to me to have this time capsule of us singing together years before we ever had any kind of romantic involvement, and just to be able to look back on that, it's really really special. But that's how we met here in Nashville.
Yeah, that's great. I didn't realize she sang on that record.
Yeah, it's on "Take Me Away" and "Where Did All My Good Friends Go." She's the vocal on there.
Oh, I'm gonna go back and listen to that. That's great. Well, y'all wrote a song together called Nunya. That was kind of a fun one that was on your album, What It Is, back in 2019, I believe. How did that one come together?
So she's from South Alabama, and she's has a remarkable aptitude to string words together in a way that is funny and descriptive and so many things. And she just has a real gift for language. She's also has a pretty heavy accent at times, and a lot of phrases that come from her family that literally nobody else uses. Like they have their own language. They have words they've made up that this means that, and whatever, like you would never know unless you grew up with them. And that word, I don't remember if she said Nunya or something, which is something people say. It's not like the most obscure thing in the world, but short for Nunya business.
It's like Nunya business.
Yeah,
yeah.
And so anyway, it just stuck in my head, and I wanted to capture that. Over the years, I've written down all these things she says. Like I want to make a book one day of just her expressions and sayings. But so I started writing that with a friend named Adam Landry. And we were over here at the house one day writing, and Allison walked through and she said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, we're just stuck on this song." And she said, "Well, you got to just make it about this and this and this." And then she just walked out the door. And that's her move a lot. She'll come in and say, "Well, this is what you should do." And then I'm out. And
she was
right. She was absolutely right. And that's exactly what we did. We wrote about this, and this. And so I gave her a co-writing credit on it. She didn't sit down and put pen to paper with us, but she absolutely inspired it and steered us with where we were needed to go, which we would not have gotten to without her. So
easiest co-writing credit.
Yeah. Well, she might argue that, living with me is the toughest co-writing credit ever, but we got a song either way.
Hayes, lately you've been touring with Band of Heathens.
Yeah.
As Hayes and the Heathens, which has got to be fun. It looks like fun. I've seen some videos of y'all performing. Would love to see you in person. But tell me how that one came together. Seems like a great fit. Yeah,
the Band of Heathens are a mostly Austin-based band that I've been friends with for many years. Gordy Quist, one of the lead singers, grew up around where I am from, and I've known him since my mid-20s. Anyway, years ago, we did a tour where they're just very musical band. They have a lot of attributes that I don't have. They're great singers. They're great instrumentalists, and they're also just really good guys. And so we did some shows where they were opening up, and I was just really impressed with them, and I kind of wanted to see what it'd be like to play with them. So I hired them to not only open shows, but be my band as well. And we did a couple tours like that. And then last year we put together an event in Luckenbach, Texas, where we were just one band. And we had guests and stuff, and we were playing our own songs, but we were helping each other out and taking verses and stuff. And it was a great turnout, and we had a great time. We're going to do it again this year. We both had a kind of an open year. Like we're both putting out records next year, and we thought, our dance card is not very full right now, and this was a lot of fun. Why don't we just go out and do some more of it? And everybody said sure. And so, and then we thought, well, let's make some music, some original music to go with it. So it's not just us playing together. And so we just recorded a record. We got an 8-song record that'll be out in September. And then we're going to tour some more in September and December and January. And so that's it. Just kind of a side project, but it's really fun for me because I'm a, angsty folk singer or a country front man. And I'm like, these are things that I've never been able to relax as much as I would like to and just have fun playing music in the way that I would like to. I'm in my own head a lot of the times. And playing with those guys, our rule is if it's not fun, we don't do it. And there's a lot of songs where I just get to be one of 6 guys on stage, and I'm just off in the background just playing a guitar riff, which I've never been able to do. They'll teach me, here's how I do it. And so I'll learn something, and then I just stand back there and I'm looking at the crowd and I'm smiling at people and I'm just having fun and not thinking about what do they think of me or is this going over well, or what should I play next, or whatever. It's really given me an opportunity to just get back to having fun playing music and not worry about anything else. And I needed that.
You're clearly having a good time based on what I've heard. And y'all have a new single out called Nobody Dies from Weed.
Yeah.
And this might be pushing the boundaries of Southern living material. But it does sound like a fun one, and I'm sure you're getting a great reaction from the crowd when y'all play it.
Yeah, it's a fun song. I wrote it with a guy named Driver Williams, who plays guitar for Eric Church. What's funny is that the day after we released it, whatever group is in charge of studying the danger of this or that released a report saying that, in fact, no one has died from weed. And so it was really funny to have it validated by the government the day after we put that out.
This is like the CDC
yeah,
or something?
something like that. Yeah, they tell you your cholesterol is this, or smoking will do this to you. And they came out and they said, essentially, it can impair, don't overdo it, and don't, it can lead to some bad decisions or some accidents, but no one has actually ever overdosed and died solely from marijuana. And so it gave me some cover with my family or the more conservative folks in my audience, because I could just say, well, it says right there on the website. It's
well, I guess we can put that disclaimer on this podcast too.
Yeah, please do.
Well, Hayes, just one more question for you. And I often ask this of people, what does it mean to you to be Southern? But in your case, I want to ask you, what does it mean to you to be Texan?
Yeah, I don't know why that just hit me emotionally for a second. I think for so long, a lot of my identity was wrapped up in being a Texan, and I haven't lived in Texas for a number of years. So it's been a change, much like when I went off to school in Arkansas. It was like, okay, there's more to life than that. But having said that, there is a pride in where I'm from. There is a connection to the people that travels. There is a musical history that is deep and rich and profound and second to none. It is a land of iconoclasts and individuals and every type of person, and I think of it as a place of dreamers and storytellers, and of my people. I've got hundreds of relatives. Most of them are gone now, but it's just how I was raised. And so to be Texan, I don't know what it means to be Texan, but what it means to me is, I guess, a place of love.
You ever see yourself moving back there or convincing Allison?
Yeah, I think about it sometimes. Like my son is in school at the University of Texas, and my parents and brother live in Houston, and still got a lot of friends and family down there. It's very hot. I don't miss that at all.
Especially right now. Yeah, it sure is.
Yeah. But yeah, I've got a lot of love for the state, and I play there all the time still.
Well, Hayes Carll, congrats on everything, and good luck with the tour. Good luck with the album, and thanks so much for being on Biscuits and Jam.
Thank you for having me.